Alright, what's going on, guys? When it comes to news about Elden Ring, nightreign, and FromSoftware, right now we are in the last few days of the calm before the storm. As we've been covering over the last few videos, we're about to have more information and gameplay than we know what to do with, for several reasons, including of course the network test where we'll actually be getting hands-on with the game ourselves, which will be starting in exactly a week, alongside the full marketing train for Elden Ring, nightreign, where we'll likely be getting new gameplay, a release date, and a whole lot more. For more on that though, check out the last video. But before we get fully lost in all of that information, there is quite a bit of other stuff to discuss. Not quite as exciting as new leaks and gameplay, but still fascinating if you enjoy staying up to date on everything FromSoftware. We've got a new financial report from Kadokawa that gives us a good look into the business side of things, including on their partnership with Sony, which I think is very important to understand the future of FromSoftware and where they're going with their game development. And then beyond that, I'm sure you've heard at least a little bit about the commotion going on in the Bloodborne community. We gotta break that down too. What's actually going on and what does it mean? Is it an indicator of Sony working on another Bloodborne project? We're gonna get to the bottom of it. But as we get started today, if you want to stay up to date on all things Elden Ring, nightreign, and FromSoftware, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and now let's get into it. Like I said at the beginning, one thing we always try to keep up to date on here on the channel are the quarterly Kadokawa financial reports. Now, if you're not a long-time subscriber and aren't familiar with these, Kadokawa is the main parent company of FromSoftware, and now as of a few months ago alongside Sony, and every fiscal quarter, they put out long, detailed analyses about how the business is doing. And although they're not the most exciting things, it's a great tool to look and see the present state of FromSoftware and their future outlook from the standpoint of making money, which oftentimes can be a fantastic tool for us as fans to better understand the way our favorite game studio is going. So let's go ahead and get straight into it. Looking at the consolidated earning results for the third quarter of the fiscal year, and looking at the part that we actually care about, the gaming sector, it states that both sales and operating profit achieved high growth of around 40%, thanks to the DLC for Elden Ring contributing to domestic and international revenue. Beyond that though, it does seem like Kadokawa is on the road to recovery. As we covered extensively in the lead up to the Sony deal, they weren't having the best of time with that major cyber attack and lower operating profit all around, so it's good to see things turning for the positive. They go on to provide some more explicit numbers in their overview of the gaming segment, where they state that in addition to DLC continuing to do well, strong sales of the original title, Elden Ring, helped boost royalty sales significantly, particularly overseas. And you can see a 53.5% increase in third quarter. Now down in the future outlook section, here's what they have to say about Elden Ring, nightreign. Elden Ring, nightreign, a spin-off title of Elden Ring, is scheduled for a 2025 release. As a cooperative survival action title, the spin-off title offers a new way to enjoy the franchise with a game design that differs completely from the original, in an effort to maximize the lifetime value of the series. Now, I do find it interesting that they're confident telling investors specifically that it's going to be an entire divergence from their formula, which is a good thing because it suggests confidence in the product. They then go on to share some explicit numbers for the DLC sales, alongside repeat sales of Elden Ring, and no surprise, extremely successful, we all know that. But after this, things get pretty interesting when we look at the full breakdown of the partnership with Sony. And you can see they have it divided between all their business segments, which of course the one we want to focus on is gaming. So in this partnership they have IP creation and IP distribution, with the first side, IP creation, broken down into discovery and development, creation, and investment and acquisition. And IP distribution, we have media mix, distribution, and investment and acquisition. And we can see how that applies to the gaming sector. In investment and acquisition, that states joint investments in prime business areas and global content domains, as well as acquiring content holders both domestic and international, including publishers, animation production companies, and game developers. So basically what that means is they're giving them more money, and with this Sony partnership they'll likely be expanding to add new game companies to their umbrella. Now, Kadokawa does have a few other game developers besides FromSoftware, but FromSoftware is very easily their number one. If I have to guess how this materializes, I could see them looking for more developers to make things like anime games, which they own the IP for. I don't really think this means taking over a lot of big studios, but we'll just have to wait and see on that. Now here's the real interesting part of this. Look at what's not in the gaming sector. IP creation. Now if we're reading that at face value, that sounds like they do not have plans to make Sony exclusive IP. That was a big worry of people when Sony was announcing this partnership with Kadokawa, that FromSoftware would devote a lot of their efforts to making PlayStation exclusive games. games. But if they're not lying here, then as an investor, if that was their plan, I would love to know it. You could also say now that doesn't count for existing IP, since technically that's not creating the IP. So it doesn't rule out a thing like a Bloodborne 2. And of course, plans are always subject to change, but if I was somebody that was very worried about FromSoftware going PlayStation exclusive in the future, I would take this as a good sign. Now on the other side, we have production of media mix. So likely things like manga, TV shows, and movies. Those will definitely happen sometime in the future. It continues with live action films and drama series, but that expands everything, so that doesn't necessarily 100% apply to the game IPs, although it likely will. Further expansion of the scope of the company's game publishing. They've been saying that for a long time, but we haven't seen it materialize yet. And then finally, developing production, distribution, and sales bases and acquiring companies overseas. So more expansion. So all of this looks very good. And here's why these things are important to look at, because they're literally telling us exactly what they're going to do. And if we are to take them at their word, which I think we are supposed to, since again, this isn't written for gamers, it's written for investors who want to know all the details, since they're putting in very large amounts of money and want to make money back, then this looks like a best case scenario for FromSoftware. It does appear, like we all hoped, that Sony is taking a very hands-off approach, letting them do their own thing, but focusing more on the back-end side, the things that happen outside of game creation. So again, if you were someone that was uncertain of this Sony deal, afraid that we could see the downfall of FromSoftware, this is best case scenario for us as fans. This is giving FromSoftware more resources, allowing them to have to worry about other things a lot less, and they can just continue making the games they want to make the way they want to make them. I know these financial reports aren't super exciting, but when we get things like this, it's very important to look at them so that you can stay in the know. But y'all let me know what you think about this down in the comments section below. I think it's great news, but I'm curious to see y'all's thoughts. But now let's talk about some not so great news from Sony. I'm sure you've seen the headlines and the conversations going around about how Sony has recently DMCA'd a lot of Bloodborne fan projects, including Lance McDonald's 60 FPS mod and the Bloodborne PS1 demake. Now, naturally, this is the perfect breeding ground for speculation. First of all, the 60 FPS mod is 4 years old, and it has been up without issue all that time. And then the demake gets struck down almost back to back with the 60 FPS mod. The timing is very interesting to say the least. Now before we jump the gun and say, well, Sony is obviously only doing this because they're working on a Bloodborne project of their own, hang on. There is an explanation. For starters, this is not the first time Sony has DMCA'd Bloodborne projects. The creator of the demake also made a Bloodborne kart game, but was forced to change the name to Nightmare Kart for copyright reasons by Sony. The nature of these projects is not the issue. The reason they're getting DMCA'd is because they were using the copyrighted name Bloodborne. That is the criteria for the DMCA. And another thing, as it stands right now, the fan-made PC port of Bloodborne is still up. Now it could be target for the chopping block here soon, but at least as of right now, it's not. That's why I hesitate to say that this is a sign of a Sony Bloodborne project. It still could be, and there are a few things that are weird about it, such as this happening back to back, and not so long after the Katakawa and Sony partnership. Now, as we also covered recently in the video about Bloodborne, even executives at PlayStation don't think there's any projects going on for Bloodborne. My uneducated guess on this, and I could be entirely wrong, is that this is just Sony's legal team catching wind of these projects, noticing they're using the copyrighted name, and following their standard procedure. Now, could that be because they're preparing to release something with that copyrighted name themselves? Yeah, it could be. But we really have no way of knowing. I don't think this is strong enough evidence, and personally, I think that if something actually were going on with Bloodborne, somebody would spill the beans on it. It's just too popular, and fans have been waiting way too long for more. That's just my personal opinion. I could be totally wrong, but we've just seen stuff like this time and time again. And I would love to be wrong. I hope I am. But anyways, what do you guys think? Do you think this is a sign of a Bloodborne project being made by Sony? Do you think it's just their legal team at work? Or is this finally the time it happens for real? Y'all let me know down below. Either way though, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to leave a like on it and remember to subscribe to stay up to date on all things FromSoftware and Elden Ring nightreign. But with all that, I will catch you in the next one.